Hi, my name is Rajesh Sebastian. I am an adjunct faculty member at Southern Florida Bible College and Theological Seminary. Today I am speaking about giving that pleases God. I am doing this video mostly for people of Indian churches because during my few years of experience with Indian churches, I have found that most of them do not teach the right teachings, right biblical teachings about giving. When we look at the background of tithing in the Old Testament, we read that the practice started with Abraham, and then Jacob is the one who makes a commitment on that, and then the Jews picks up on that practice, and tithe gets established as a standard for giving in the Old Testament. Now, before a Jew started giving tithe, there was something else he was supposed to do: circumcision. So once I posted on my Facebook, why don't the pastors and elders who insist on tithing do not insist on circumcision also? So a pastor called me, a pastor who is well educated and very thorough in biblical standards of teachings on giving also. But sarcastically he said, Rajesh, don't ask this kind of questions. Some people might actually, they might do circumcision if they have to, do that in order to get tithe. So anyway, that is a joke. So when we look at the background of tithing, the first one who gives tithe is Abraham. Abraham gives tithe to Melchizedek of the loot that he got when he defeated some people who defeated the people, residents of Salem, and took away people and their wealth. Abraham goes after them, defeats them, and brings back the loot and people, and then he gives tithe of everything that he got that day to Melchizedek. Melchizedek is the priest of true God, and he is also the king of Salem. So Abraham gives him tithe of that loot in order to get blessing. And Melchizedek blesses him, and Abraham is not giving tithe in an ongoing manner. It was just a one-time thing. Later on, we see about Jacob in Genesis chapter 28, verse 22. Jacob makes an offer to God. He says, I am establishing a stone as a house for you, God. And then whatever you give me, let me read that for you, okay? Genesis chapter 28, verse 22. And this is the stone that I have set up as a pillar, will be God's house. And all of that you give me, I will give you a tenth. So basically, Abraham is telling, you give me 100 rupees or $100, I'll give you $10 back. We have to understand that Jacob is a tricker. He tricks his father, he tricks his brother, he tricks his father-in-law. He tries to trick everyone, and he's trying to trick God too, saying, I'm building a house for you by making this stone stand here, and then whatever you give, I'll give you 10% of that. So if you give me $1 million, I'll give you $1 million. I mean, if you give me $10 million, I'll give you $1 million. So what a deal. This is how many people preach today also. You give 10% of everything to God, he will give you tenfold and hundredfold. So you are giving with an evil intent, a wrong expectation. That's why later on God rebukes people, Jewish people, for the way they were giving offerings. Let me read a few verses for you from the Old Testament. So it's not in the New Testament that we see that a different standard is set up. It's in the Old Testament itself. God rebukes this kind of practice that was based on the letter of the law. Amos chapter 5 verse 22. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Psalm 40 verse 6. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have opened, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Let me read it again. Sacrifice and burnt offerings you did not desire, but my ears you have opened, burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Proverbs 21:27. The sacrifice of the wicked is detestable, how much more so when brought with evil intent. Let me read that again. The sacrifice of the wicked is detestable, how much more so when brought with evil intent. So when you bring your offering or your tithe or whatever with the motive of getting tenfold or hundredfold, how God detests that. Or if you bring your offering in order to get some favor or a position in the church, how God detests that. Jeremiah 6 verse 20. What do I care about incense from Sheba or sweet calamus from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable. Your sacrifices do not please me. So we see this in the Old Testament itself, that God was rebuking their way of giving, which was based on the letter of the law. God was not pleased with that kind of giving. Now, when we come to Jesus, before the New Testament is written, let's see what Jesus is telling about this kind of giving. Let's read Matthew chapter 23, verses 23 to 24. Matthew chapter 23, verses 23 to 24. Jesus says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness." Please pay attention to this. God is more concerned about justice, mercy, and faithfulness than your tithe. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but you swallow a camel. Let me not mention the time. Once an elder from a church called me and said, "Rajesh, if you will give tithe accurately to the church, we will consider you for to be a committee member in the future." Look at that offer. Is like an offer made to Jesus. You give me this or do this, and I will make you this and that. So give tithe, and we will make you a committee member. Ask if I was interested in that. He didn't even ask me if I was interested in that. So that's how people give. Sometimes people give tithe to the church to become a committee member, to become an elder, to become a deacon. God detests that when you make that kind of giving. Now, why did Jesus rebuke these people for giving like that? Let's read another verse from the same chapter. Just before that, in fact, Jesus sets up the background for this rebuke is in Matthew chapter 23 itself. Matthew chapter 23 verses 5 to 7. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. They give always in order to get something greater. They give so that they will get honor. They give so that they can buy a position. They give so that they can become an elder in the church or a deacon in the church. Those kind of giving, God detests. So it's not that Jesus just rebukes these kind of people and tells them, what is right kind of giving, but he even sets an example. Let's read that from Mark chapter 12 verses 41 to 44. Mark chapter 12 verses 41 to 44. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I will tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of the poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." See the kind of giving that Jesus expects is not 10%, it's everything you have. And that's the problem. You cannot match it. You can match the Old Testament standard of 10%, but you cannot match this one. You cannot give everything that you have. That's the problem that most Christians have today. You cannot meet the standard. You can meet the standard of Old Testament, giving a tithe, doing a circumcision, but meeting the standard of New Testament is actually impossible. And I'm going to tell as a second part of this talk in a different video what that standard is. We will go into that. But I just want to, kind of in brief say, God detests the giving that's based on a standard that you think will please God or you think will achieve your righteousness. And God detests when you give in order to become, or in order to get a chair in your society or in your church. And God detests when you give with a wrong intent. Jesus expects you to practice more justice, mercy, and righteousness than give tithe. Those things are primary, tithe is secondary, and even your giving is secondary. God concerns about the issues of heart than issues of money. Let me stop here. I'll have a second part for this video, and if you're interested, you can continue to watch that. God bless.